So as we all know, the higher ranks of the featherweight division have taken a pretty strong hit lately, with both Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway leaving the division to move up to 155 pounds, with there being absolutely no sight of them ever moving back down. So it ultimately then begs the question, who in the featherweight division could potentially fill their shoes that they left at the top? Well, we do have some great upcoming talent. We've got Jean Silva and Lerone Murphy, to just name a couple, but let me tell you that in time, Pico will be filling those shoes. And that's what I'm here to explain in this video.
As Pico, Ali Abdelaziz said his exclusive negotiation window, I think, ends this week.
I definitely know the boys are interested in him.
Pico is going to bring a great injection of competitiveness into the UFC's featherweight division. Pico is a very exciting addition to the UFC roster for multiple reasons that we will get into. But firstly, let's jump back into the early days of Pico's life, where he was basically born into fighting sports. He started wrestling at the age of 4 years old following his older brother, but by the age of 6, Pico was wrestling in tournaments consistently, and then at the age of 9, he started boxing consistently and had moved to Japan to focus on his boxing skill heavily at such a young age, which then paid off because he became a junior Golden Gloves champion at a very young age, and then at 13 years old, he fought in the European Pancration Championships in Ukraine, and he went out there and won the Golden Cup in the championship. So this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Pico's credentials before even stepping into MMA itself, winning multiple tournaments in all 3 disciplines between 2008 at 12 years old and 2016 leading up to his 18th birthday, where that year he trialed for the Olympics in wrestling. However, he only just fell short from making the team to Frank Molinaro, which would have seen him be the first teenager in the Olympic wrestling team since 1976. So it's safe to say he is more than a talent in that wrestling department. And with Pico not only succeeding in the wrestling, but the boxing and pancration all around Europe, South America, Asia, and of course America itself, competing and winning championships in these disciplines through his early years, he was catching a lot of attention. And that attention was attracting none other than the Bellator MMA organization, where even before his Olympic trials, Bellator's president Scott Coker liked what he saw and set up a developmental contract for Pico in 2014, which allowed him to trial for the Olympics in 2016, but would then see him fight under the Bellator promotion after the trials were completed. And with Pico not making the Olympic team, his MMA debut awaited. Now, with the world-class wrestling, the extremely clean boxing, and the MMA skills already fine-tuned from his pancration days, a 20-year-old Pico had a ridiculous amount of hype surrounding him. He was being touted as the greatest prospect in MMA history by the start of 2017 for not only his skill set, but for also having a star-studded corner with guys like Freddie Roach and Eddie Bravo training him. But his debut against Zach Freeman at 155 pounds, unfortunately, did not live up to the hype, as he was submitted by a guillotine choke in 24 seconds. This clearly put a lot of doubt in the community's mind as to whether he really was the prospect that people were raving about. But moving into his next fight, he made one very important change. He moved down to 145 pounds, where he has now gone 13-4 across his now 8-year career, which he has spent almost the entirety of his career fighting for Bellator since 2017, at age 20 going 12-4, and also having his most recent win in PFL going 1-0. And throughout this time, Pico had fought at both featherweight going 11-3 and lightweight going 1-1, with one 150-pound catchweight fight where he destroyed Adley Edwards in arguably his greatest performance that he's ever had. So understandably, within these fights with performances like that, he's been been a moderate to a huge favorite on the odds in every single fight he has had aside from his first fight, which there's just no data on, but he has spanned from a -190 favorite all the way up to a -800 favorite that even swelled to a -1200 at one point. And it's clear why, because he has basically finished all of his wins brutally, with most of them being in the first round. And he's been serving the Tom Aspinall treatment, with his average fight time barely spanning a round, with a clean 85% finish rate overall so far. And in his last 10 fights, he's only lost once, which was by a doctor's stoppage due to a serious shoulder dislocation, where his corner was just yanking the shit out of it to try put it back into place, which was obviously a ridiculously stupid thing to do. But even though I wouldn't count that as a loss, there are still losses to count, and some brutal ones at that, where he suffered back-to-back KO losses against Henry Corrales in their first fight, and to Adam Boritz eating a perfectly timed flying knee when he was shooting for a takedown. So ultimately, we do know that he's not invincible, and coming into the UFC, he hasn't faced the toughest opposition. I mean, he's beaten good opposition like Leandro Higo, who is one of Patricio Pitbull's main training partners, but nothing compared to what the UFC brings to the table. But if anyone is going to help him prepare for the UFC stage, it's going to be with the help of Jackson Wink MMA, with Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, which he made that move after his back-to-back KO losses in 2019, and has now looked borderline unstoppable, which, with how fast he has been improving, along with the help of an elite coaching team, he can definitely bridge the gap in experience when moving into the UFC this year. Now, when it comes to the physical attributes, Aaron Pico does have the longevity on his side coming into the UFC, as he is only 28 years old and doesn't turn 29 until late September, which is definitely a problem for his opposition with how fast this guy has been improving. Now, he stands at 5'8" tall, which is nothing to scream about, but he does have a 71-inch reach, which is above average at featherweight, and with that striking that he has, it's definitely a positive. But more importantly than the age and the reach, especially recently, in combination with his heavy forward pressure and wrestling style, he doesn't gas out. He has a very good gas tank when it comes to 3-round fights. His 5-round experience is unknown, as he hasn't had a title fight or a 5-round main event before, but from what I've seen, it's going to be hard to see a fight with Aaron Pico going past 3 bloody rounds, let alone 5 rounds. But with the pedigree of wrestling that he has, do not be surprised if he has some of the best cardio within that 145-pound division already. Now, of course, first off, the discipline that most people are going to be excited for with Aaron Pico landing in the UFC. This guy has got goddamn fucking dynamite in his hands, and through MMA, this is the literal reason why he has the popularity that he has. Aside from the wrestling purists, it is the striking. He's got 9 KOs, with 1 in the 3rd round, 2 in the 2nd round, and 6 in the 1st round. And this is all ultimately down to his pure boxing ability. He has extremely fast hands, but the technique within the combinations is where he really thrives. I mean, he is a very confident forward pressure orthodox style boxer, and confident indeed. He strongly believes that his striking is better than Ilia Topuria's, and aside from proving it against top opposition like Topuria has, it might not be the most far-fetched thing in the world with the caliber of striking that he has been showing. And even against much tougher competition than he's already faced that the UFC will bring, man, they have got to be careful with Pico on the front foot against them. He's extremely good at stalking and cutting off the opposition, and once he gets in range, he's got the timing in the exchanges and that mini Alex Pereira-like power on his left hand. He has got absolutely disgusting uppercuts to the body. He's got very fast 1-2s down the pipe and great timing on his overhand right as well. But the boxing itself isn't the only thing to worry about. He's got great timing on his elbows up close on the feet, and if he isn't knocking them out on the feet somehow, he's got the brutal ground and pound in his arsenal as well. And additionally, he has very fast head kicks and leg kicks when he's fighting at range. But that being said, he's definitely not a point style fighter. He's rarely ever on the back foot or at that kickboxing range because he just loves to push the pace constantly, which gives him a fan favorite style. But I will say that fan favorite style is great offensively, but defensively there are some holes that have been exposed and are open to being exposed. Firstly, his base is very wide and his lead leg is definitely susceptible to leg kicks, which can affect his power through the hips and his ability to wrestle if that leg is chewed to bits. But stylistically, there are not many fighters in the featherweight top 15 who even heavily utilize those leg kicks anyway. And I will say that his chin, secondly, his chin is compromised to some extent after having those back-to-back KO losses, which is lost to Adam Boritz by a flying knee. That was ultimately, when it comes to a technical capability, that just was honestly just a Hail Mary strike in all honesty. Pico was just dominating the entire fight up until he simply got caught mid-takedown attempt, which granted was a perfectly timed knee, but there wasn't any actual proper defensive flaws there. But where there is a flaw from the loss prior to Henry Corrales in their first fight is that Pico just got too aggressive in the exchange and didn't tighten his strike defense, breaking off from the clinch where he got caught perfectly with a left hook. But he then got his revenge in his latest fight against Corrales at 155 pounds where he destroyed him. He looked absolutely huge, packed on a lot of muscle, and that performance cemented his move to the UFC. But regardless, moving into the UFC, he needs to tighten that strike defense off clinch exchanges, especially against aggressive, fast guys in the clinch like Arnold Allen and Diego Lopez. But if that's tightened and he's checking leg kicks, defensively he's looked pretty bulletproof, and offensively you do not want to be pressured by this guy on the feet. Now, as I said in the career highlights, Pico was a wrestling prodigy before his time in MMA landed, and even though his striking is definitely impressive, his wrestling is his true base, because he has trained all over the world from a young age to absorb the experience from European, South American, and of course American wrestlers at a state level within that time. And at a state level, this guy was a machine. He was winning medals and titles everywhere as a freestyle wrestler between 2014 and 2016, and he went 42-0 in his freshman year of high school, which had him ranked #1 in the country for his age at that time. And to cap all of that off, he had the Olympic trials as well. So how does all of that translate into MMA? Pretty damn well from what I've seen. This guy is extremely good when it comes to the wrestling. No one has been remotely close to outworking him with the wrestling in his MMA career so far, because he level changes into takedowns off of his striking combinations extremely well, which just suffocates the opposition because they've got the KO power to deal with and the takedown ability. And the takedown ability, it is endless. He can be hunting double legs very well. He can find single legs, just ripping the opponent to the ground from a single leg, running the pipe. He can pretty much get them effortlessly. The only time I've seen someone attempt a takedown against him was Adley Edwards, which he just stuffed the takedown with ease and reversed the position and then took him down. So aside from the timing of a perfect flying knee to his chin, this discipline is pretty impenetrable impenetrable for Pico. I would absolutely love to see the wrestling exchanges between him and Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling, as he is definitely up there with their level of wrestling credentials, without a doubt. Now, compared to the striking and wrestling, the pure grappling does get eclipsed. He's 2-1 in the submission department, whereas previously mentioned he was guillotined in less than 30 seconds by Zach Freeman. But benefit of the doubt, he didn't have any pure grappling experience back then, which moving through his career, now he has the 2 wins, with one coming against Solo Hatley Jr., just flipping him over and sinking a rear naked choke. And more impressively was his 3rd round Anaconda choke against Aiden Lee after beating the crap out of him for 3 rounds. So at the moment, Pico is a blue belt in BJJ and may be heading into the UFC as possibly a purple belt. And granted, he has improved with the pure submission work, but it is definitely heavily carried transitionally by his wrestling credentials. So someone with an aggressive submission game like a Diego Lopez or Brian Ortega from any position can potentially expose weaknesses in his game, being the submission defense. And if anything, that is definitely the weakest part of his game. So ultimately, Aaron Pico has all the makings to be a fan favorite in the UFC. He's got the aggressive forward pressure boxing heavy style with clean combinations and of course power, and he has the wrestling as his base to match that as well. And I do believe that they give him a top 15 opponent coming into the UFC, but not someone in the top 5 like Pitbull has been given, because Aaron Pico, he has the skill set without a doubt, but he's not proven in the cage to warrant a top 5 fight yet. But as we've seen from Kai Asakura and Patricio Pitbull most recently, it's best not to nosedive into the deep end on your debut. But him coming into the top 15, there's only 3 types of fighters that I can really see challenging him. A point style fighter with great leg kicks and good counter wrestling like Volkanovski, or a hyper aggressive striker with a submission advantage like Diego Lopez, or a very high-level wrestler that can potentially even out the playing field like a Movsar Evloev. But that being said, all those names are in the top 5, and eventually, I believe that's where Aaron Pico belongs. So I hope you enjoyed this Fighter Spotlight video, and if you want to see more Fighter Spotlight content, definitely check out my video on Renier de Ridder versus the middleweight top 15 and how he matches up against every single one of them, as he is now entering the top 15. I will leave that just on the screen here, and please like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.